Hey everyone, Jordenne Rachelle here. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, herbalist, mother, yoga instructor, and I am obviously excited to talk about healing the feminine. It's a big topic overall in evolutionary astrology. As you know, if you've read any of Jeffrey Wolf Green's books, he talks a lot about the shift from the matriarchy to the patriarchy, and there are a lot of other amazing talks on this topic as well, and I'm sure that if you're drawn to this, you've already started to feel into the immense importance of really healing the feminine on all levels, whether you are male or female or however you identify as your gender yourself. That's sort of besides the point. It's more so to realize that all of us have these shadows, carry these distortions of even how we understand the feminine, and of course the masculine, because everything comes from the feminine. So we have to understand that if one archetype or one polarity, one way of seeing the world is distorted, everything else that's built from it is also distorted. A lot of times when we are looking at the different archetypes in astrology, we tend to focus on the moon and Venus and the goddess asteroids and the Lilith trinity and so on, rightfully so, to understand distortions or wounds in the feminine. But today I just want to talk a little bit about the distortions that are underlying all of the archetypes, because all archetypes are therefore emanating some sort of distortion based on cultural conditioning, based on how all of the myths have been changed, based on patriarchal conditioning. So, of course, I'm really drawn to speak about this topic. Being a woman myself, I have a mother, grandmother, sisters. I come from a big family of women, which has been amazing, and have amazing female friends and goddess sisterhoods and tribes. And I am been so blessed to witness so many amazing women leaders in my life. But there's still this part of me that doesn't completely understand womanhood and the powers of my feminine body, despite being a mother. You know, my own creativity, my own emotions, my own psyche and spirit, my own full-on connection to the earth. Why? Because I am part of this society, because I am part of this culture. And I did not grow up in a matriarchal society. I grew up in a patriarchal society. So even though I've made a lot of conscious attempts to work on my conscious evolution, my deconditioning of the programming that's really been instilled in me from birth, I'm still working through a lot of my own healing, a lot of my own understanding of natural law, which is very a part and parcel of understanding evolutionary astrology. I'm a Sagittarius, so of course I'm led to understanding natural law, and the ways that I'm doing that at this time are really through exploring healing the feminine. And so hopefully this meeting is helpful for you if you are working with clients or if you are working on your own healing. This is not meant to be in any way an exhaustive list or description of what's going on. I'm going to make mention to quite a few really excellent books and other resources that are very easily, readily available, free, a lot of them, that I highly recommend, just to get a little bit more of a historical background, and you know, reading up on the myths and all the different versions of the myths and so on, just to get a better understanding. So really, if you look at much of the wounding in our current society, so much of it spans, whether it's as an individual, you know, the alienation, the detachment, not really feeling fully connected to the earth, feeling sometimes like we are apart from or outside of nature rather than an integral part of nature, right? That's that separation from the goddess. That's that separation from the mother. Collectively, and the way that we are using the land, I'm going to talk a little bit about this too with Uranus and Taurus right now, Taurinus, right? There is a big discrepancy between how we are using the land and what does that mean for food and health and future generations and being connected to and aligned with natural law of the seasons and the cycles, right? There's this idea in our culture that everything is about more is better and new is better and technology just for the sake of technology rather than, you know, using technology and forward motion for the sake of progress and healing trauma, resolving the deep wounds that have more or less been relegated to the shadow realms. I really want to look at sort of how did we come to be afraid of the darkness, of blackness, of womanness, of the mysteries, right? How did that happen? And how is understanding that history going to help us move forward in terms of reclaiming our power, in terms of reintegrating these parts of ourselves that really make us who we are, that really can't go away. But the fact that we've sort of repressed these natural urges, that we've repressed nature, this is what causes the distortions. This is what causes the perversions. This is what causes the pain and the suffering, because we are detached from a true understanding of what's really going on. So, truthfully, there's a lot of emotional repression. There's a lot of lack of connection to the earth, alienation from community, people feeling unloved, unworthy, feeling not enough, feeling truly disconnected from a sense of purpose or a core sense of collective unity and identity, simply not knowing the great magic of this gift of life, all of this that is born from the mother. And so all of this alienation, repression, and disconnection from life itself are symptoms of a wounded sense of femininity. And so that feminine nature that really needs continuous loving attention, as we are all born from a mother. We all are connected to life on this earth who is innately feminine, right? We need to look at our own distortions. So much of this is really happening through our current expressions and explorations of that South Node in Capricorn with Saturn and Pluto. We're doing a deep purge right now. We are really at a tipping point. We're seeing a lot more kind of putting out there on screen, exposing the distortions that have sort of been there insidiously hiding. And now we can't really hide from it anymore. We know that things need to change. We know that we need to, all of us, be feminists, whether we are male or female, because we are of a feminine nature. And to support the feminine in ourselves is supporting the earth, is supporting life. And so here is a slideshow that I prepared for you all. Here we go. I love these glyphs made by my beautiful fat friend, Emily Romano. She's amazing. We've got Juno, Moon, Venus, Pallas Athene, or Pallas Athena, however you like to pronounce that, Vesta, Earth and Water, Ceres. Of course, we have the sacred spiral, the spiral that if you look at, the black is one direction technically and the white is the other direction. And so it's like this double spiral, both spirals that birth and then going the other way, the death, and then the fact that they kind of congeal together in the center, forming one, really coming to this understanding of the life process as it's always unfolding. And so we know, of course, that curved lines are also connected to the feminine. And so, of course, we've got these current transits, North Node in Cancer, South Node in Capricorn from 2018 until 2020. So we are definitely working through a purge. We are looking at all of the deconditioning. So with that Saturn conjunct Pluto, and conjunct the South Nodes over this past year. And then, we're going to have that massive Capricorn stellium in 2020. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got Pluto conjunct his own South Node in Capricorn. And Pluto itself in Capricorn really being the bottom line of our evolution, right? Right now, we are deconditioning from the past. We are really looking at this shift from the matriarchy to the patriarchy, and we're at a tipping point where we're starting to go in the other direction again. We're starting to understand. So many of us, having reincarnated at this time, we're likely here. We're likely in different bodies, different lives at the time of the shift from matriarchy to patriarchy. And so a lot of us are kind of working through these angers, this rage, this need for healing, this need for balance, this need for integration, this deep sense of coming back to ourselves. So all of this is really seen in these current transits. Of course, we're seeing more and more people have these conversations. Well, this is why I wanted to also bring your attention to the fact that Pallas Athene or Pallas Athena will be squaring the nodes June and July this year. And so that's really kind of pulling us back to those skipped steps collectively of sort of how are we using our creative intelligence, our wisdom to reconnect with the feminine. We are having to go back into the past to understand what happened, right? So this is where past life regression is going to be helpful. This is where just, understanding the basis of your chart is going to be very helpful to just look at what are the past life stories that you're very likely repeating, right? If we understand that anywhere between 80 and 95% of what we are doing in our daily lives is all stemming from the subconscious, and only 5% or maybe a little bit more is coming from conscious decisions, so much of what we are doing and acting upon and our decisions that we're making are based on the trauma of these past lives. If we did have trauma, which I argue that most of us have some sort of trauma, right? And trauma is on a spectrum. There's not just one way to understand it. But this sort of collective trauma that happened to the feminine as it was repressed and had to go underground, right? Thinking of the Inquisition, 500 years of women basically having the choice to be beaten by husbands because that was okay by the Christian church or whatever the other monotheistic religions sort of dictated to men that was okay. Women became property, or they had the option to become witches and were therefore burned at the stake, but still held in their sovereignty and standing up on their own 2 feet. And so we didn't really have a lot of options as women. We were either sort of held in chains via the system of marriage, or we were burnt or persecuted in some way. It was very difficult for women to really speak and be honored for our power and our wisdom. We were made to be feared, right? When Christianity sort of flipped, and not just Christianity, but it's one example of, and that's just the one that I'm most familiar with. Everything was flipped, right? So everything that used to be honored and revered, right? Pagan, the word pagan is of the people, right? And it's of the land. Everything connected to that was deemed as was demonized, right? Was deemed satanic, which is really only a very recently invented phenomena that didn't even make sense. It's like, to be even satanic, you have to agree that there's only one God and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go down that road right now. I highly suggest you read The Great Cosmic Mother by Monica Shu and Barbara Moore. That is a book that is recommended by Jeffrey Wolf Green to everybody, especially if you're involved in work yourself of healing the feminine. But as we are looking at all of this history, sort of digging it up, if we even look at the foundations of the United States or many other countries, sort of what was going on in their charts around the time of their conception, right? There's a lot of purging going on in terms of our systems that are based upon classism, racism, sort of domination, submission, suppression of women and people of color. Like, we're looking at this right now, and this is a repeat. This has happened before, and we're looking at it from the space of, okay, now we can really do something about it. Now we are realizing that we don't need to give away our authority to some government or somebody else to provide us with our worth. We are not looking outside of ourselves as much to understand the meaning of our lives. We're starting to make a little bit more of our own decisions. We're waking up in a lot of senses, and this requires us looking at some painful parts of our history most of us don't want to look at, right? I have conversations with people all the time where they bring up, even within the past 50 years, all of the advances of women, women becoming CEOs and climbing social ladders and becoming politicians and in the government and being some of the wealthiest people on earth, like millionaire women and things like that. And the way I look at it is like, well, yes, that is amazing. And we have come a long way. We still have a long way to go. And I don't think that we can measure progress and healing economically. That's what's happened, right? Our bottom line in our current society has been based on economics. Even a lot of the issues that we are talking about are linked to fairness of wages, which of course that's very important because we need to survive, we need to eat, we need all these things. But it's the basic approach to our life, our lifestyle, that still needs to shift if we really want to work on healing the feminine nature in our lifestyle, in our culture. Right? Not just taking from the land, but giving back and thinking about the next 7 generations and so on. Wanted to share this with you. This is another, these authors talk a lot about history of the goddess and all of the different cultures and all of the overlap, and then also a lot of the myths and how they were turned on their heads and, you know, made to be something that we should be afraid of, right? Like serpents, snakes, the whole Adam and Eve story, even though serpents and snakes really represent earth wisdom. And so therefore we, you know, the patriarchy needed to demonize those things in order for women to be feared and therefore repressed, and they became evil, right? This power, this wisdom, this healing ability, this, you know, the first shamans, psychics, the people who really created society based from, you know, this heart center, this spiritual center being alignment with natural law. All of this became then something to be feared. So it all went underground, or, you know, in certain spaces disappeared, never fully, of course. But so this is an example, the Locelle goddess. She was found in a cave in France, 20 to 30,000 years old. You know, she's got the horn. The horn is a symbol of the goddess. She's got the beautiful breasts. She is, I love this, the horn is carved with 13 marks. That's a symbol of the moon and the mystery of menstruation. You know, the cornucopia, abundance of the earth and goddess. And so there are countless examples of matriarchal societies living in peace and harmony for thousands upon thousands and thousands of years, and something shifting in our collective consciousness that then started to repress this energy. And so we can even look at all of the myths that we typically use in astrology to kind of see how did they become the myths that we know them to be today? Are they even complete, right? Like, we use a lot of these myths to dictate our interpretations of charts, right? Especially if thinking about the goddess asteroids and Venus and the moon. We should really be questioning these things, and where did they come from? And to what degree are they accurate? For one, you know, in terms of a greater sense of identity and consciousness, and what is really helpful and supportive for humanity as we use astrology as a tool for evolution and self-knowledge, right? Versus in what ways is it perpetuating stereotypes? So we really want to look at that. Just got a couple of images of the spiral. The spiral is the great goddess in everything. I love that. Horns. Again, one of the goddess's animals was the stag. The snail is one of the goddess symbols as well, because the snail is a hermaphrodite. And also, speaking of that, bisexuality, I really feel that a lot of how we are shifting in our current culture to be more open and accepting and of the queer society in general, we are starting to realize that in order to fully embody all of our nature, our sexual nature, our nature as human beings, we need to be able to incorporate all sexual preferences, but we also need to understand that so much of our power is linked to our sexuality, and so much of our sexuality has been repressed. So therefore, our sexual power is repressed. And this is really, I think, a big movement towards opening that up. Again, so many of the matriarchal cultures were bisexual or had an openness in that way. And when Christianity sort of looked at that, or other monotheistic religions looked at that, it wasn't possible, like, you know, polyamory or these other ways of relating. It's not as easy to control somebody if they can be free sexually, right? If they can be with who they want, if they can love who they want, if they can express themselves who they want, if they have sexual sovereignty, it's basically impossible to control them. So you need to take away their sexual sovereignty. You need to take away, you know, women's ability to have orgasms, feel pleasure, right? It was a sin for a man to even, you know, spew his semen on the ground, right, in the book of Genesis. So we want to look at, you know, like this waste of life idea, sexuality being only based on the means for reproduction, as compared to how it was before, as sexuality as a way to, you know, open the 10th gate, to explore the ecstatic experience of being alive. Like, sexuality was just part of life. It's how we connected to the goddess. And so when we demonized that, we took away some of, you know, females and the feminine energy's greatest power, which is through sexuality, sacred sexuality. So I could talk all day about different distortions of the goddess, but I really want to just point out that most archetypes have been completely distorted from their pure expression. And what we know psychologically, any urge, any natural urge, and you can think of all archetypes that we will explore in astrology as being linked in some way, shape, or form to a natural urge that we are going to have as humans. And we know that what is within us needs to be expressed. And if it's not, it becomes a complex, or it becomes part of the shadow, right? This is where we get perversions and mania and people not understanding themselves and mental illness and all of these things. So as a culture, as a collective, we've sort of condoned a certain level of mental illness by us just being so completely disconnected from the truth of who we are, by having to just basically deny our nature. And so because of that, most of the archetypes that we use and understand have been sort of molded and fit into our understandings of that. So again, with this Pluto, Saturn, South Node conjunct all in Capricorn, we really want to look at how do we define the nature of our reality, because all of that is shifting and changing. Our consciousness is expanding, and we need to be able to look at our archetypes, look at our myth, look at our story, look at how we are interpreting things to sort of evolve with that. So everything being distorted from the pure expression is going to create those perversions, right? This includes the traditional goddess archetypes as well as the masculine energy archetypes. And so as the sacred feminine became distorted, so then did the masculine. They must heal together, finding a new synthesis in alignment with natural law. Like I mentioned already, much of this distortion is based on myths being flipped upside down, not making sense, sometimes replacing the females with males just to make it a more male-oriented myth. Myths just simply being inaccurate as retold by male historians. And while it may be challenging to go back and see like what was the original myth, there's always a seed of it there. And so we can infer greater things when making these connections of what was hidden and what was lost, and sort of let it resurface and come back to its glory and power. And so the natural potential, this is kind of how I'm going to divide everything through the distortions and the potential. The natural potential, all archetypes represent the energy represented through natural law when they're able to be expressed in a pure state, right? So if we say have sexual desire and we are found in a loving consensual relationship, but for some reason the society is deeming it as inappropriate, what happens to that sexual desire? It goes inside, it becomes internalized, it is then demonized, shamed, guilted, repressed, becomes perhaps a perversion, becomes perhaps something that cannot be shared, then becomes some other sort of illness. As all emotional repression is very much linked to most of our illnesses that we are experiencing now. So that's just one example. Same with anger, perhaps. So you grow up and you are taught to fear your anger. You never therefore learn healthy expression of it, and you then tend to repress your anger, and then what happens? Somebody pushes that button one too many times and you explode, right? And so that becomes that sort of perversion of anger. Anger in and of itself, that passion, that will to become that we associate with Mars, is not evil in and of itself. It's just an emotion that has been repressed. And so that's another way to look at it. That's how something like Mars, the masculine principle, has been distorted through the distortion of the feminine as well, because we're not really fully able to express our emotions. And this goes, of course, for men and women, hands down. So all archetypes are born from the goddess, but have been distorted and therefore requiring new awareness and healing. And I just want to say too that it's not about going backwards to return to some ideal of the goddess, right? It's about redefining and reinterpreting the archetypes through contemporary and holistic application. And this is also about feeling into things. Again, we've sort of lost our connection to be our own authorities, to our own beliefs in a lot of ways, collectively, right? Especially if we're talking about the consensus state of consciousness, kind of losing our sense of how do we even know what to believe, because we're not even physically feeling it. We're not even emotionally connecting with it. We're not even feeling what ecstasy feels like, maybe other than through drugs. So we don't even know how to connect with that energy consciously without drugs. That's another example, right? And so it's we have to come back to a lived experience and expression of the goddess. It's not just about filling our heads with knowledge, which is the masculine way. It's about actually experiencing it physically. This is why I became an herbalist, mostly for that reason, to even just be able to give myself that sort of physical experience of working with plant medicine to raise my consciousness, but to actually physically know what it does in my body, know what it does to me on an emotional, energetic, spiritual, psychic level. And so this goes, this is true for all of our connection with the earth world and the goddess energy, and perhaps also in our communities. So let's look at some distortions of the sun, aka current life purpose. This is a really common one that I'm seeing a lot. Most people who come to me are in a place where they're asking about their purpose, which is really normal. I mean, collectively, you could say that we've entered a really individualistic sort of form of finding ourselves. So we have all these gifts, but we don't really know what to do with them because there's not real guidance, which usually in matriarchal cultures came through the line of the mother or from an elder woman, shaman, medicine woman, where you would sort of be guided according to your gifts for society, and sort of groomed and nurtured according to the gifts that the society could see in you. Whereas now it's not the case. Now it's like, oh, well, what kind of job is going to make you enough money, and you better do that to be accepted. So kind of don't worry about that heart and what's guiding you and your passion and your drive. Instead, just focus on perhaps, becoming a lawyer because that's going to make sense for you, and or maybe it's going to serve the ego, or just, your personal will, or just kind of doing it just because you don't actually know your purpose, but just because it's something to do. And then that in and of itself creating room for disease or illness, just not feeding the sun, right? Our sun needs to be fed. We need to feed our purpose. I have the belief that we will find a way to do this, but a lot of times it just takes a lot longer when we are just totally out of touch with who we are. And so again, those distortions, just feeling like you have no purpose, you're lost, low drive for life, just don't know what your purpose is, for life in general or for self. And it's so interesting, right? In this current age where we are all meant to be these individual shining stars, which in theory is really beautiful. We have to remember that we're still a collective, right? Never before have we seen such alienation and detachment, and people feeling lonely, people feeling disconnected, even though we are easily able to be connected from across the world, as you are currently exemplifying by joining me on this call. So really, we want to look to this natural potential of the sun, which is very much connected to knowing our why for life. When you're connected to your why, when you're connected to your purpose, you are energized from the inside out. Your purpose is connected to source, connected to the goddess, connected to the earth and sky. Right? You are energized when engaging in the activities linked to your purpose. And your purpose is also linked to collective evolution, not just about this individual sense of gain, which is what we are taught in the current patriarchal distortion. A lot of us are deconditioning from that. So the moon, this is probably the biggest one. All of our moon stories have been highly distorted to create this fear of the feminine, fear of the dark, fear of the past, and this creates fear of full self-expression, especially if you are a woman, because for centuries, for thousands of years, it was just not okay to be a woman in many societies. So just that very basis of being shamed for who you are, and that moon being our sense of soul, that sense of who we are, our medicine. So when we're not able to even connect with that, losing that confidence, that self-worth in our expression, we can have all sorts of fears and phobias about ourselves. This can also lead to a fear of growing up. You definitely want to look at the planetary pair of Moon Saturn for that one as well. Any more distortions of the moon can link to being disconnected from our emotions, disconnected from the wholeness of our nature. Right, that ebb and flow, dark side and light side. We can also look at Black Moon Lilith, Asteroid Lilith, Dark Moon Lilith to really understand the Lilith Trinity and her relation to the moon as well. I'll talk about that towards the end. not wanting to experience change, as the moon really can show us change, how we are changing and growing as she is the integrating force that keeps us rooted in the present between past and future versions of self. That's how we look at the lunar nodes, that south node being the past and where we came from in a very generalized sense, and that north node being where we are headed and what we are sort of consciously focusing on in order to carry out the evolutionary intentions as set out by Pluto. So if we are not even comfortable being ourselves on some subconscious level, which much of it is, much of our issues are very subconscious, it can be very hard to integrate past self and therefore current self and therefore future self as well. And we can also not be very open to receiving love or nourishment. So the natural potential of the moon is really, you know, we want to be connected to our natural ebbs and flows of life, the spiral, the life-death life cycle. We have become terrified of death in our culture, so much so that we don't even acknowledge certain aspects of how death is required for life, right? How we must kill things in order to eat, right? We kill plants, we kill animals, and we eat them. And then, you know, there's this sort of missing component of that gratitude back to the land, back to the animals, the sense of life and death being in balance. Instead, we have cows living on factory farms and, you know, cutting down the rainforest for a good steak and things like that, and people just being totally disconnected from that experience. Or if you're aware of it, not really even knowing what to do, because in our world, the economy being the bottom line, not everybody can afford to either grow their own food or, you know, harvest their own food or have their own cows, chickens, whatever you eat. And so we're kind of left dependent on the structure, which is not serving natural law. And so, of course, this is something that is overall linked to that life-death life cycle that we are sort of disconnected from. We know it is there on the subconscious level, but in certain ways we're trying to escape it, deny it. Again, coming back to those fears, fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, fear of the feminine. And so we really need to integrate ourselves from past and be receptive to the future and the changeability. This will contribute to us being emotionally aware and mature. We want to make sure that our mind is serving the heart. We want to make sure that we have a healthy connection to the mother archetype. So that's not just our own mothers, but of course we want that, and to the degree that it is available to us, or just, you know, female guardians or mentors, teachers. But we really also want to have a healthy connection to the mother within ourselves and in nature, the great mother who is mother to us all. Mercury. We can have limited mindset or perception of nature, reality, when we're sort of operating from that mental distortion. We definitely can believe that we are our thoughts. Everything serves the mind. We only accept information through rational, logical mind. Maybe we're only using words to describe or understand or classify the world, really discounting perhaps pictures, which are technically more related to Venus and feminine ways of communicating, and other ways of knowing, right? That's a big one. I spent a lot of time in the academic world, and basically almost everything that I read came from male historians and male writers, and maybe there was like 5% of feminine writers, so even that. But there was sort of this lack of connecting to external sources of wisdom or information or ways of knowing, right? Because everything had to be proved via the scientific method. And so if you weren't proving what you knew via the scientific method, everything that you said was discounted as bunk or not real or not provable, right? And so even understanding the way we look at science, and we're really coming a long way. So I don't want to sound all doom and gloomy here, but this is me talking about the distortions in this moment. But we're really coming a long way to bridge science and spirituality, which I think is the next big wave. And so the natural potential of Mercury and also being able to speak our mind is really having that mind linked with the intuitive mind. And so this is, again, that connection with Jupiter, higher self connection. But we want to make sure that it is this sort of clear channel that is linked to truth, that is linked to natural law. Otherwise, we're just kind of in these ruts, in these patterns of just repeating more conditioned thoughts and words and phrases. Really, that's one of the #1 things that people are working on in mental health, is how to align with positive self-talk. So one positive way of working through that is just being able to witness the patterns of nature and natural law, to be able to make sense of our connection with nature, to classify our experience in alignment with the truth. Again, we want the mind to serve the heart, and we want the mind and heart to be connected and both equally active, if not heart more active, in our decision making. Venus, this is a big one. Most of our myths of Venus, especially linked to Venus as morning star, Venus as evening star, the idea of her descent into the underworld via the myth of Inanna, based on her going to hell and all of these things. It's arguable that none of this is actually accurate, and it's not really describing what's really happening, right? So many of the myths, again, were sort of flipped upside down via patriarchal distortion, meant to make us afraid of them, meant to make us afraid of their power. Right? So more of these distortions, perhaps a focus on materialism, greed, luxury for its own sake, which contributes to this polarity of, the scarcity, poverty mindsets. We can look at beauty as intended for pleasing the opposite sex only, or pleasing male, I should say, male interests, male tastes, mostly according to heteronormative male tastes, ads, Instagram, social media platforms, which then breeds all this comparison and jealousy and not really knowing our own worth, comparing our worth to the looks of others, or these very surface level ways of knowing ourselves. We can see worth of others and self is coming from the outside. Sort of, how does it look? We also see a lot of things linked to like unfair wages based on gender. And so this too, I would argue, falls under the realm of Venus. She represents both our resources and our sense of beauty and connection to the feminine principles. And so in her natural potential of expression, we understand that beauty comes from within, right? On a very surface level. This is something that we see a lot, people having massive self-worth issues and comparison, and then it links to all these other things in life. So we have to understand that, seeing ourselves as one with the natural beauty of the earth, this also kind of allows us to step outside of the cultural conditions of separateness. The abundance mindset. So, and when I say abundance mindset, I'm not trying to only sound like law of attraction, make more money kind of abundance mindset, which is valid in its own right, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So it's more so the abundance mindset that there is enough for everyone, but we're just, we're not allocating resources appropriately, but there can be enough for everyone, right? Think about how much food is wasted. Think about, I read an amazing book when I was doing my master's in global development, and food movements and food sovereignty was my focus. But one book that I read was Stuffed and Starved by Raj Patel. Amazing book, because it really shows and pinpoints how in the West, more food is wasted than, and people not being able to own their seeds or replant their own crops. Instead, they need to buy from Monsanto or these other big corporations where, the economy, again, is the bottom line. And there's this sort of disconnect between what people actually need compared to what the economy needs to thrive. And so, again, we have a lot of people really stuffed and overeating, and there's that epidemic of obesity and illness related to overeating. And then there's all this food waste, which is so heartbreaking given that there are so many people that are starving, right? And so these kinds of imbalances stem from a lack of connection to the goddess. So we really want to make sure that we're giving back to the land that supports life, and that we are honoring the feminine, the goddess, in all her unique and various forms, right? So this is not hierarchical as patriarchal society would suggest everything is supposed to be, right? The goddess comes in many forms, and no one is above the other. There's no hierarchy of beauty, love, connection, and so on. And so another beauty of Venus is this ability to give and receive love with ease. But so many of us have not really seen true love, right? We've seen conditional love instead of unconditional love. Mars, distortions. There can be a focus on only getting what I want. It's all about me. There can be the sense of domination over the natural world. Not sure what else I was going to say there. There can be this immature expression of passion, anger, rage, fighting, aggression over others, selfishness. And so again, this goes back to what I was mentioning before. If there's thwarted Mars energy, say in a child who's like, I am learning to express myself, I am learning to become who I'm here to become, but they are then sort of put into a box and not able to express their energy, their passion, whatever it means, whatever it is, their sex drive, right? They're told that sex is bad. You cannot touch yourself there when you're 10 years old or 5 years old or whatever, right? That becomes shame, sexual shame, all of these things. That becomes a very scary sort of trigger for trauma later on. This leads to things like rape culture, aggression, violence, right? We're healing a lot of this with the current transit of Chiron and Aries. Right? Another distortion of Mars, along with Jupiter and Pluto, is that misogyny and sexual distortions. There can be also, with a Mars distortion, just low energy or no drive for life, not able to connect to our reason for being and what we are here to become. So the natural potential for Mars, right, is that our desires and our action is in alignment with the soul, because Mars is the lower octave of Pluto. Our desires are being accepted and expressed in a pure way. This is a healthy expression of anger, justice. This is maturing the ego instead of just trying to deny it. This is a drive and will for life that is strong and supported through aligned action and able to manifest from the heart, right? Like our Mars guides us to our Pluto evolutionary intention. And so we need to be able to express that energy in a healthy way in order to kind of get to our bottom line Pluto mission. And also then a healthy sex drive and passion and just this will to live and the energy to become, this energy to do what we came here to do. So Jupiter distortions, greed, materialism, overconsumption, right? As Jupiter tends to expand everything. But when it's distorted, this is not connected to higher self or intuition. This is maybe following gurus, but not connected to source. This is dogmatic perspectives, perhaps lording over others. The idea of there being only one truth, one God, one right answer, everything else is wrong. Disconnected from natural law, putting man-made law at the top of everything. The goddess being ripped out of culture via renaming her in a distorted lens, like I mentioned, to create fear, therefore easier to follow patriarchal conditioning. Again, this is rape, misogyny, infidelity. We know the stories of, Jupiter and Hera, or Juno, Zeus, Hera. The natural potential of Jupiter and how we are expanding our consciousness is this alignment with the higher self. We have a clear line of communication with our guides, with our soul, with our intuition, with natural law, as Jupiter rules natural law along with Sagittarius in 9th house. There can be a true marriage through equality, not through domination submission. So I'll mention more on that in regards to Juno later. There's generosity, there's speaking truth, open-mindedness, continuous focus on conscious evolution. And so this is not the idea that there is one truth. This is continuing to expand our consciousness in alignment with how we are evolving. And really we can become our own teachers, our own gurus based on our own inner barometer, which is, you can trust that inner barometer when you are aligned with source energy as a source of guidance, with God, goddess energy. Saturn is a big one, and Saturn we are really working hard through right now in Capricorn, being conjunct Pluto in the South Node. Really being in Capricorn, that archetype of domination, submission, or master slave. These are, the distortions of structures that serve only the top of the pyramid and everybody else is below, just serving those sort of selfish ends at the top. Hierarchy. Authority is projected externally. Think about politics. A lot of times, even our own distortions coming through this Saturnian conditioning may bring us back to the idea that the only way to make change is to vote in the right president, for example. And while that may be an excellent form of change and definitely a step in the right direction, as we become, more aware of our own ability to be autonomous and make our own choices, we start to see more that the true authority for how we live our lives comes from us, comes from as a collective, our ability to heal and transform, and it not being just about this need to have a king, queen, external authority make our decisions for us, because it implies that we're not mature enough to do it. I think that we are and can be. Also, Saturn distortions. Systems are classist. They are only serving those at the top. Think education, think politics. If you think about the fact that, so high school, for example, used to be charged for, and I'm Canadian, so I'm thinking about from that perspective, but you don't have to pay for grade school, you don't have to pay for high school. I know that's not necessarily the case in certain private systems in America, but there was the idea that high school was made free because it was the baseline requirement of society to function, for people to have the necessary skills to thrive in the world. We didn't do that with university. And the argument is that, and at least in the West, North America, because it's meant to be this system that sets you apart from others, because you have more money, or perhaps you were given grants or scholarships or whatever, but it still required money and privilege to be able to get into that place. And so, of course, there's all of these attempts of affirmative action and things like that, which are really trying to mitigate this classism that's built within the system that's sort of meant to say this person is better than this person. Or this person is more qualified or more intelligent because they have this piece of paper that says this versus this. And in some ways I might sound a little bit hypocritical saying this, because I also do have a master's, but in that experience, I witnessed that there was a lot of this classism going on. And I do come from a privileged background. I was given grants and scholarships, especially being a woman of color and all of these things. And so I did get to benefit from this affirmative action and from, you know, the systems that are trying to make right in a lot of ways. But there's just that overall energy of how are we conditioned in our society to even decide what is valuable information, or what education is valuable for our culture. Like, what do people really need to be learning about? What are we deciding to teach our kids in schools and things like that? And so a lot of this stuff is just being totally torn down with Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn conjunct the South Node. And we're just really looking at how are they built up in the first place, and what are the values that were sort of espoused to be at the center of what we are trying to do in our culture, right? So much of it is the factory line, the assembly line based off of the Industrial Revolution. And we're finally starting to get to this point where we realize that's not actually helpful. And that, you know, we're trying to come back to a more holistic sense, maybe a more connected to the goddess sense, right? I have a daughter and I want to put her in schools that are, you know, maybe forest type of schools where they learn outside, where they're connected to the goddess, where they're connected to nature and learning about, you know, how to have a physical experience in alignment with natural law. And so when that's sort of disconnected, it's really easy to see then how we have all of these, kind of going back to Jupiter, all of these other sort of ideas about there being only a very limited version of truth that is sort of put at the top or accepted in society. So again, this Saturn distortion, that the economy is the bottom line of success. There's little to no regard to the finite nature of resources, not reflecting on the next 7 generations that we were born the earth from, and so on. So the natural potential as individuals, as communities, is to really have healthy boundaries, to be able to parent ourselves, to really understand that we are the authority that we require to live out our purpose, to live out our karma, master our karma and our dharma. We want our structures, our communal societal structures, to be aligned with natural law. We want our systems to be based on equanimity, so no more classist systems, racist systems, gender-oriented systems, right? We want there to be all-inclusive systems, also focused on the next 7 generations, also honoring our wise elders. We want to realize our inner authority and potential for mastery based on our own experience and skills, not simply through capitalist, classist systems of achievement. And again, we want to find fulfillment in through our alignment with our soul purpose and not simply through material gain or worldly accolades. And so again, Saturn represents the consensus state of consciousness, Uranus, the individuated, Neptune, the spirituated. And so when we're kind of working through these Saturnian deconditioning, we're looking at like, where are we aligned with consensus thinking and why? And is it serving us? And in what ways am I sort of ready to kind of evolve those things, push the consensus forward in terms of, you know, our evolution as a collective. And so Uranus, again, that individuated state, when we're looking at Uranian distortions, Uranus is linked to trauma, and it doesn't mean that just because we have Uranus in a certain house sign aspect that we are guaranteed a certain type of trauma, but I argue that all of us have a certain level of trauma through the displacement of femininity, the displacement of goddess energy sort of disappearing from our culture, and us having to sort of fight back to reclaim something that is inherent in nature and just who we are. So a lot of us have those unresolved traumas that are just continuously perpetuated. Another distortion is the technology just for the sake of more is better, new is better, instead of better is better, right? Or less is more, or, you know, so thinking about the new iPhones coming out every week. When we think about science without conscience, when we are just trying to create something new just for the sake of it, or again, it also being something to serve capitalist or neoliberalist agendas. This can also be a force that creates more trauma. So again, this is me linking back to my own experience and research. I looked into the food sovereignty movement. If you've not heard of La Via Campesina, I highly recommend checking them out because they are a pro-autonomous food sovereignty movement that is around the world. But a lot of what they are sort of coming up against is, you know, small farmers not being able to save seeds, right? The very essence of life, being sold GMO seeds that then do not reproduce seeds on the new plants that they give them, so that they are forced to then buy the same product or same seed from Monsanto or the other big corporations. So a lot of people are becoming a lot more aware of this, which is really good news. But there's still things going on like land grabs, people being evicted from their generation upon generation living on that land, but because they're not paying the government for it, they can't live there anymore, or the government will just sell land. You know, I'm thinking of what happens in Africa, the land grabs. It's very heartbreaking, people being completely displaced from the land. And these are all Uranus and Taurus issues, right? The last time this happened was 84 years ago. Think the Great Depression, think the Dust Bowl in America. So a lot of us kind of having to look at in what ways is our technological use supportive to natural law? And in those ways, we will sort of be kind of, you know, rewarded by being able to survive. And if we are not, if we are sort of operating out of this just sort of economic baseline technological focus where it's just about making more money, or it's just about greater production without thinking about the quality of the soil, the quality of the food, the nutrition of the food, and all of those things, and sort of perhaps our farming techniques in general, we risk starvation, we risk greater loss of food, we risk the land being able to support us, because the goddess, as she is known, is all about this balancing energy between life and death, life, death, life. And so when we are just sort of making this assumption that our resources are infinite, that we can just plant more, harvest more, you know, have more cows born and cut down more rainforests, but we know that there's a limit, we're sort of asking for Mother Earth to kind of strike back in a way, or not actually be able to give. And I know that this kind of butts heads with certain law of attraction ideas, which I also am very, you know, fascinated with. But there is this idea that to think about the world as a finite resource is sort of a limited idea, you know. I mean, but we do live in a 3D reality where there there are finite resources, right? We've already hit peak oil, right? We know that this is real. I mean, we're either going to have to kind of figure out a new technology for how we want to drive cars, right? Electric cars, it's an option. But I mean, gas is going to run out, and we already know that. So, you know, thinking about different things like biofuels, and also just finding a different way that technology can just serve us for healthier food systems, and it not just be about serving the bottom line of economy. So again, that leads us into our natural potentials for Uranus. And remember, the mantra for Uranus is choosing change before change chooses you. So we want to look at technology that's used for perhaps healing trauma instead of creating trauma. Healthier food systems. We want to be innovating systems, to be more inclusive to the needs of the world, not just somebody's pocketbook. We want to look at the balance of technological and organic approach to sustainability, the old and new world working together. Sorry about that. We want the technology, the information to be for the people, not under economic lock and key. And we want to be focusing on prosperity and well-being of future generations and using technology to offer us that. And we also want to be open to change and having a progressive mindset. With Neptune in Pisces right now, we are very much working through all of our belief systems that are based on patriarchal God, kind of stamping out the goddess and goddess worship culture. We are looking at disillusionment of all sorts, you know, and how we are sort of finding perhaps, hopefully, a newfound clarity of the sacred feminine. But we may also kind of come to these painful realizations that we did lose a slight connection to her wisdom and the wisdom of balance in life. And so a lot of us, if we are not fully paying attention to that on a spiritual, energetic level, we might kind of experience where we have to inevitably surrender or lose out or become disillusioned, which is a good thing in the name of evolution, but we might become disillusioned by what we thought was real, by what we thought was reality, by our concept of God, goddess. And so another distortion could be being disjointed, just disconnected from beliefs at all, right? Because the more we sort of enter just our mind space and this sort of rational, logical way of experiencing and understanding the world, we stepped away from our ability to experience our spirit through our psychic connections to the earth and other beings. And so when we, and ecstasy, right, being able to connect through our full sexual power, our ecstatic power, to be able to feel into the goddess in all of her forms, we lost that. And in order to kind of, we know that we've lost it in a way. And so in order to kind of try to find her again, we are searching through different kinds of drugs, alcohol, other forms of escapism, because we know there's some sort of meaning of life or some sort of timeless truth that we may not be able to access based on our current cultural conditioning and distortions. And so the natural potential, we want to come back to this space of oneness, unity, cosmic consciousness. We want to look at being connected to source wisdom in all forms and experiencing the sacred in all, this cosmic unity. Every single being has spirit, this earth consciousness, seeing the divine in all beings. Also our attunement to our own psychic abilities and being aligned with source in that way. Goddess, God as one great mystery or great spirit with many faces so that we can understand them culturally. Coming to Pluto. So this is where we are looking at our fear of change, our fear of evolution, where we may be disconnected from our evolutionary intention, where we may be resisting evolution. So, you know, we know that it's going to happen either by choice, which is smoother, or resistance, which can be leading us to crisis, which we may be arguably facing collectively right now. But we really need to purge all patriarchal distortions, just overall, you know, all societal conditioning, to really heal what has been shamed, demonized, and buried in goddess culture. We need to release a need for power over others based on fear, repression, ignorance, and also working through perversions of natural law, leading to mutation, illness, and soul loss. Some of the natural potential of working with Pluto is really surrendering to the soul's highest good, just aligning with why we came here. Pluto is our bottom line why. We want to be consciously evolving, aligning with our soul path, and we can learn so much from the goddess who wants to help us do this, because remembering our soul path is remembering the goddess. We want to look at power with others instead of power over others, power within self. We want to transmute lower level desires into higher level desires. And so again, this is returning to source. We want to reach deep into the soul for our bottom line why. And in terms of soul retrieval, which I think is very necessary right now, a lot of people more than ever kind of returning to shamans or medicine women, medicine men, to help them find their soul again. Fun facts, which you would find out if you read The Great Cosmic Mother. You could learn about all the first shamans were women, first medicine women, all of these things, first herbalists, and so on. So coming back to soul is coming back to the goddess as well. And so I'm just going to go quickly through these asteroid goddesses, but I want to mention that almost all of what I'm expressing about these can be found on the School of Evolutionary Astrology website and message board, and I highly recommend just spending, you could spend years probably on that site, just reading through these really powerful discussions from other amazing astrologers. And so the distortions of Juno, a lot of it is linked to giving power away to men, husbands, partners through marriage. This idea of becoming subservient through that sense of commitment, needing to commit oneself completely to the other by kind of debasing yourself. This can also link to infidelity, jealousy, rage. I mean, look at all of the Juno, Zeus, Juno, Jupiter, Zeus, Hera myth. And this also links to toxic femininity and toxic masculinity, really just trying to control one another, surfacing in relationship patterns. And so the natural potential of Juno, when we see her in her highest form, is really about reclaiming power and equality in relationships. And so much of this depends on the level of consciousness, being, consensus, individuated, or spiritual, or any of those sub-levels within those three levels of consciousness. And so we're going to see different expressions of this depending on the level of consciousness, but all of it can be about, in some way, shape, or form, sort of reclaiming power and inequality. Ceres. Distortions. Again, of course, I've got this focus on talking about food and eating. So that's my specialty, but not eating in alignment with seasons. Perhaps looking at eating disorders, food issues in general. The polarity between stuffed and starved, or poverty, scarcity, not enough mindset, and then the opposing polarity, greed, waste of natural resources, being stuffed. This also links a lot to the angry mother who perhaps can't support her children. Also, mothers being demonized is not enough, and they are always to blame, according to Freud. So that's a distortion. Natural potential, working with Ceres, I would say, is eating in alignment with the seasons, just having that consciousness of the seasons of the earth, the seasons of Gaia, eating locally perhaps, eating for nourishment, not just to be full, or eating based on normative desires to be thin, accepted, beautiful, right? Like there's so many diets out there where it's just about being thin or losing weight instead of being healthy. Not more natural potential, soils being nourished, healthy food full of nutrients again. So many people are deficient in so many vitamins and minerals because even if you eat an amazing plant-based diet, you're not getting all of the nutrients you need because the food is really does not hold the same amount of minerals and vitamins that it used to based on the soils and the weather and patterns of just how food is being grown. So, I argue that small farmers are supported, feeding all the people, abundance mindset, all of these things really associated with Ceres, the goddess of the harvest, the mother goddess. Also body love and positive self-worth, loving children, honoring the mother and all her sacrifice for us to live, honoring stretch marks and things like that, right? Like that full-on honoring of what it means to be a mother and seeing the mother for all that she does for us, right? Coming back to witnessing the all-loving mother, ultimate compassion, unconditional love, always being welcomed by the mother. This nurturing language that is aligned with the soul. Pallas Athene, I highly recommend looking into Tashi Power's talks on Pallas Athena, and also Asteroid Goddesses book by Nura Jordenne Rachelle. Excellent resources for understanding more about Pallas. She, as a distortion, is linked to men in skirts, or feminine intelligence only being used to support patriarchal agendas. On the flip side, women being seen as powerless or weak, especially when it comes to war or fighting for a just cause, right? That they need men to defend them and so on. And I really recommend you look into the Medusa Algol myths, where Pallas Athene supposedly cut off the head of the Medusa because she was raped and therefore made impure by the god Neptune Poseidon. And so Pallas, doing her duty, she had to keep the peace with the men during the shift of patriarchy, and so she cut off her head. So this I read in Nura Jordenne's book on Asteroid Goddesses. She also mentions other aspects of the myth where she keeps Algol, or Medusa's head, on her shield, kind of showing in a way that sort of underneath the surface alliance with that feminine nature that she also had to cut out for the sake of keeping the peace. And so if we talk about, wisdom keepers, Pallas Athene temple, all of the ways that women were holding the wisdom, there also had to be this sort of taking care of the women. So sometimes the best way to do that was to just kind of do what the men said, which is unfortunate, and sometimes that's still something that women do. And so that could be how, in our own way, we are operating out of a sort of distorted expression of Pallas Athene. So some natural potential of her as an archetype is creative intelligence being used as a form of synthesis between masculine and feminine energy potential. So not one having to be above the other, but them working together. This is also about reclaiming power and authority, expertise, women as wisdom keepers and way showers. This is social justice for all the people, not just to keep the patriarchal system running. This is the protector of women, the tribe, the sisterhood. Vesta, she is goddess of the hearth, sacred service. As a distortion, she is looked at as being an actual virgin, right? If we think about the Vestal virgins, there are definitely very inaccurate stories and myths of virgin actually being linked to being untouched by a man, sexual chastity, all of these things. Or maybe it was elevated slightly from that and referred to as simply them being only involved in sacred prostitution, which in a way is kind of minimizing what they were doing with their sexuality. It was much more than the idea of prostitution, especially the way we think about it now. That word has a lot of negative connotations. But the natural potential of Vesta being about these Vestal virgins being sovereign unto themselves, not owned by any man, having sexual sovereignty, not necessarily sexual chastity. So this is control and sovereignty over their own body and their own sexuality. And so a lot of people who have strong Vesta in their charts are really exploring what that means, because oftentimes there's a little bit of shadow or fear or abuse or sort of sexual trauma linked to that, because it was not deemed for thousands of years for women to be okay even having sex or having orgasms, those kinds of things. And so a lot of this is linked to that, sort of women reclaiming sexual sovereignty. Sexuality is meant to support connection to the goddess, rising Kundalini energy, opening the 10th gate, really helping us to connect to our creativity, our co-creation with the divine, forms of ecstasy to really connect with life itself. Oh, and then here we go. And there's a spelling mistake there. Lilith Trinity. And so the symbol that I have here is Black Moon Lilith, which is most commonly used, but we also use Dark Moon Lilith and the Lilith asteroid herself. And so this is known as the Lilith Trinity. And there's also the Lilith star, who's also known as Algol, and so that's its own thing, but not necessarily connected to the Lilith trinity, but worth mentioning, because Lilith comes in many forms, right? If we know her as the first wife before Adam in before Eve in Christianity, but she was not accepted because she was a little bit too sovereign for Adam, couldn't handle it. So the distortion of Lilith as an untamed, wild woman archetype, she was distorted to be feared, shunned, shamed, guilted, avoided at all costs, invisible, and outcast. And this really speaks to the cutting off of the original nature of the feminine, just to appease patriarchal conditioning. And again, this links us back to being afraid of the dark, the mystery, the unknown, feminine power. Anything that was connected to that was then demonized, serpents, etc. And so the natural potential of Lilith is really about reclaiming power through exploring what has been shamed into shadow. Understanding that there's no part of us that is inherently evil, right? Especially as our feminine nature, we are not evil for simply being feminine. But for many years we were. If you read, there are so many books and so many quotes, it's heartbreaking and it's disgusting to see, it being okay, for example, to lobotomize women because it doesn't matter if they're lobotomized. For example, there are quotes of psychologists, psychiatrists saying that from like 100 years ago. Or it being like the worst fate in the world to be born a woman, those kinds of things. And even if you're born in this culture and you know that that's not true and you've been given all the love and support that you need in life, as I have, for example, and many other women that I know, to hear that that happened and to know that that is held in our ancestral lineage, in our biology, in our emotional body, which, holds all of these past life stories, it's still very present. Even though nobody is saying that to us now, it happened, and therefore it must be expressed, it must be integrated, it must be healed. It needs to be integrated. So looking at the Lilith trinity, we look at the asteroid Lilith, who was the original split from the feminine nature, and sort of that like, whoa, you're not accepting me for who I am, you're not accepting me for my wildness, I'm not even expecting that, what are you talking about? To the dark moon Lilith, who is argued to represent the rage and the shadow of seeking vengeance against that original split. And then Black Moon Lilith, who is known as the Resolution Lilith, who heals the Dark Moon Lilith tendencies and then returns to the original intention of our wild woman nature as pronounced by Asteroid Lilith. And so this is really about all people honoring and acknowledging the wild woman archetype, the great goddess, cosmic mother, and so on. And so a lot of this can be explored kind of through a different lens, not necessarily astrological, but very pertinent to this conversation is anything basically by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, excellent book. Most people know about that one, but there's also some other amazing ones. Untie the Strong Woman, another excellent resource. Warming the Stone Child. Great books to just kind of help us reclaim our sovereignty and look at what has been shamed into the shadow and love it again and integrate it. So that's the end of my show there, and I'll just end it here. And I just want to share that in looking at all of these archetypes, we want to understand that there's this continuum, right? Like it's not just all distortion or all living in the light. There's, with certain archetypes, we may be expressing distortion subconsciously and not even realize it, or we may be operating mostly in the space of the pure expression of the potential, but then there's those occasional distorted viewpoints. And so, lucky thing, we have long lives, long enough to really work through a lot of this stuff, and then we'll come back for another one. And we'll keep coming back until we learn this, right? But we can do our best in this life to really just find integration of what has been deemed to be in the shadow. And so I just wanted to pull up the current transits, which I think are really illuminating for what's going on in terms of healing the feminine. And so this is for the summer solstice. in the northern hemisphere, winter solstice in the south, but Sun moving into Cancer, 0 degrees Cancer, June 21st. And I did this chart for Washington, D.C., as it could show there for some of the collective energies of the United States, where I'm currently residing. So this is really pertinent for, I know, a lot of people who may be tuning in. But you can also sort of reconfigure this wheel according to where you are living, the country, and also maybe even just for yourself, laying this on top of your own chart or inserting your own chart into this chart. And so there are very many methods to go about doing this. If you need some help, please reach out and I can guide you to how to do that. But really, we want to look at all of this energy that is very much about reconnecting to the goddess, returning to the goddess. When we think about, South Node, Capricorn, Saturn, Pluto, we are coming back to face the past, that past shift of that split away from the matriarchy and into the patriarchy. And right now we are looking at how to return. We are looking at how to heal that. So much of the ways that we can do that are very much linked to giving ourselves more space. Feminine energy, yin energy, requires stillness, requires rest, requires taking it easy, requires just time and space to love ourselves. This is very much at odds with the way that culture, Capricorn, South Node, wants us to live. We have all of these ideas that we need to be going, 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 always, always working, never, never stopping. And we work ourselves into the ground. We drain ourselves. That can sometimes be the essence of the South Node. It can be perhaps one of our core desires, something that we're working with, especially with Pluto at the South Node right now, is we know that we want to change the structure. We know that we want to change the system. And we know that there's a lot of work to be done. But instead of using all of the old ways that have been taught to us via our cultural conditioning, patriarchal conditioning of just work harder to change the system, work faster and make everything bigger, better, stronger, more masculine, I argue that that's not going to work. We need to come back into a more feminine way of doing things. And we are going to have to explore what that means. We don't, perhaps all of us know what that means, but we can start with coming to a greater awareness of our bodies, of our emotions, of our psychic connection to the earth, of our connection to others. Cancer also rules the stomach. And so I really feel that if we can't figure all of this stuff out mentally, at the very least, we align with the goddess physically through what we eat, through how we connect to and care for the earth that we live on. So how are we feeding ourselves, mind, body, and soul? And so really focusing on that. You can take some time this upcoming Cancer season to really look into these things for yourself, to kind of look at, okay, where and how am I deconditioning from, patriarchal cultural norms, right? So in your chart, you want to look at where do you have these degrees of Capricorn and then the opposing side of Cancer to kind of see this will be your axis that you're primarily working with. Which houses are they showing up in? And then therefore, what other planets in your chart are being activated by these transits? And they will really show how you yourself are sort of learning to heal the feminine, and what aspects of the feminine require more healing for you, as it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all experience. So with that, just want to thank you all for being here, for listening to this talk. I definitely suggest that you check out the message board on the School of Evolutionary Astrology. There's a lot of great conversation on there. Definitely check out books by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola-Estes, Tashi Powers. Linda Johnson has some amazing threads on the goddess, Kristen Fontana, Ari Moshe, all of them up on the message board. So go and check those out. And if you have any questions for me or some of the ways that I do readings or how I work with people to do therapies with healing the feminine or just general healing in medical astrology, please feel free to reach out and I would be glad to connect. Until next time, many blessings. Namaste.